Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. We're going to get started. It is 6 o'clock, and in respect of everyone's time, we want to get started. When you walked in, you should see QR code panels on the wall. If you have a smartphone, please scan the QR code. What we're doing is a participative style listening session and interview. Before we get started, did everyone get a chance to actually start loading up on the QR codes? Just giving everyone a little bit of time to get their QR codes if they have not gotten those already. While you're doing that, I want to just talk a little bit about how we got to this process and who you have before you this evening. Those that don't know me, I'm the Municipal Administrator, Leonard Leitner. I know some of you in the room. Those that I don't, pleasure to meet you and glad that you're here. Tonight's a very important night. As you know, we've been looking for a chief for some time now. And how we got to this point. We started off back in January. We had about 51 applicants that applied for this position. As we went through the 51 positions, we narrowed it down and gave council the top 10. And out of those top 10, council took the time and worked with the panel. The panel consisted of council members, community members, and two police chiefs from the Chiefs Association. They went through the panelists you see before you. They've gone through a couple of interviews with the panel, and we're here today with the top three. So as we go through this process, we do want you to participate in this process. You will have questions that pop up on your smartphone, and we'll go through that a little bit here shortly. But who you have before you, we asked Dr. Barnett, Marina Barnett, to join us this evening as the moderator. Dr. Barnett is a professor at Widener University her work centers on policies and community organizations. With that, she focuses on preparing students and community members on social consciousness and generalists for social work. Her work bridges micro and macro practices, emphasizing critical connections between individual clients, community members, and the needs to broaden the social and policies in the environment. That shapes how we look at things and shapes those who need it. Her work has been recognized with several awards. She's also published several articles in peer journals. And her work in community development, African American families, and service, learning, and asset mapping. She's decided to help us in this process, especially when we're talking about social work and also working with the community. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Barnett as she moderates the interview. Thank you.
Hey friends, how are you doing today? It's great to see you. Thank you so much for coming out, and I'm glad you brought your own fan because sometimes it gets a little toasty in here, but hopefully the temperature will stay comfortable. Thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation. Today we have the opportunity to hear from our finalists for the position of police chief in the Norristown municipality. This town hall is part of our community-centered hiring process. Your presence and input are essential as we evaluate who will lead your police department in the future. And so whether you're online with us or whether you're here in person, your voice absolutely matters. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you'll find a link in the video description that'll take you to our community input form. If you're with us in person, you can scan one of the QR codes, as Mr. Leitner said, around the room to access that same tool. It's quick, it's anonymous, and it helps us ensure that community voices are part of this process. And so we're going to give you just a couple of seconds if you want to go ahead and open up the link. Once you're in, you'll be prompted to answer 2 quick background questions. So you're first going to give your name, and then you're going to answer, are you a Norristown resident? And what is your street name and zip code? This helps us to understand which parts of the community we're hearing from today. And we'll pause for a moment so that you can complete that step. While you get set up, I just want to thank you. Your participation is appreciated and it will remain confidential. These responses will only be used to support the selection process. Now, just to give you a little bit of an understanding of what we're going to do today. So I'm going to ask each of our candidates the same question. Just for fairness, we want to make sure that everybody answers the same question. But what's going to happen is there's going to be a bit of a pause. So I will ask a question, and then you'll see something pop up on your phone that says, hey, answer this question for me. And it's just asking you to rate the answer. And then I will go to the next candidate who will answer the very same question. Pause, you'll rate. And I'll ask the third question the same thing. And so you're just going to see a simple scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And so you're just going to use it to share whether you feel that the candidate's response reflects the values that you feel are most important in your next police chief. So let's begin. So this is just an introduction, so you will not see a Slido reaction on your phone for this one. This is just an introduction. Gentlemen, please tell us a little bit about yourself, what inspired you to go into law enforcement, and what keeps you motivated to serve today. Mr. Trail.
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for Norristown Borough for inviting me here to participate in this, and thank you to the community for showing up. It's really important that you have a say in the future of your police department. My name is Michael Trail. I'm currently serving as the Chief of Police for Lansdale Borough. I've been in that capacity for 8 years. I began my law enforcement journey in 1991 with the Morrisville Police Department in Lower Bucks County. I moved to Pittsburgh in 1992 to continue my education at the University of Pittsburgh, and I worked for the Edgewood Police Department in suburban Pittsburgh. And then following graduation, I was hired by the Baltimore Police Department in Baltimore, Maryland. Unfortunately, I went through a divorce, and ultimately I moved back to Pennsylvania in 2000. And I actually left this profession for a couple of years, engaged in the private sector, but I came back to the profession back in 2002. In addition to my tenure as police chief, I hold a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Pittsburgh, criminal justice, a Master of Science degree from Tiffin University in Tiffin, Ohio, in criminal justice. I also have engaged for about the past 14 years teaching at the college level, undergraduate work in social issues and criminal justice. And I currently lecture on wellness and resilience for police officers in this community. I'm a graduate of the PERF, or Police Executive Research Forum's SMIP, which is Senior Management Institute of Police, a graduate of the Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command, and a graduate of the FBI's high-intensity 3-week LEADA training program called the Trilogy. In addition to my duties as chief, I'm one of the commanding officers of Montgomery County Major Incident Response Team, and we've been deployed across the state and also into different communities here in this county during periods of social unrest. We were in the G20 summit in 2009. We were at the Democratic National Convention in 2016, and most recently in Philadelphia during the civil unrest following the murder of George Floyd. I've also participated as the incident commander for a lot of campaign events during the last election cycle, working closely with the Secret Service. What drove me to this profession is, I had contact with police as a young man, and nothing really serious, but sometimes it was negative experiences. And there was one officer who, when I had contact with him, they humanized the badge, and they talked to me about how a career in public safety, public service was really meaningful. I stay engaged because this career has been great to me. And I now know and I now understand the value of our men and women. And while this job is very rewarding, it is very demanding. And it takes from our men and women a lot of their mental health and wellness and resilience. What keeps me engaged every day is one of the things I do right now is I teach. Anybody will listen. And we've taught hundreds of police officers in this county a program from IACP and Valor on wellness and resilience. We need to take care of the mental health of our officers. We need to treat them right. We need to prepare them for what they're going to see in this profession. Because if we treat our people right, that treatment will reflect on how they treat the community. And that's what our goal here is.
Thank you. Mr. Benjamin.
Good evening. My name is Mark Benjamin. I'm born and raised here in Norristown, Pennsylvania. I graduated from Norristown Area Senior High School. I left Norristown to join the United States Air Force at 17 years old, where I served for 8.5 years. I received a secret security clearance for what I've done. I was a security specialist / security police officer in the Air Force for 8.5 years. I served during Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I am a decorated veteran who received the Air Force Achievement Medal for life-saving operations while deployed in South Korea. After I got out of the military, I joined the Atlantic City Police Department, where I served for 27 years. I just retired May 1st of this year after 27 long years of serving the community there and obtaining some of the same certifications as my colleague, Northwest Command Leadership School, the FBI Leader Trilogy Institute. I'm also the resiliency officer through New Jersey State Attorney General's Office, train the trainer. So I understand what mental health is and the stigma that goes with mental health inside of law enforcement. When you ask for help, you could be shunned by your colleagues or your leaders if they don't understand what mental health is. That being said, I have my own nonprofit organization mentoring young people, which I've been doing for the last 4.5 years with the help of Derek Jeter, the baseball superstar, and Benaja Laney, the WNBA All-Star women's basketball player. We've reached out to hundreds of children. We take approximately 100 children per year on educational field trips. We teach them mental health. We also reach out to their parents. We have parenting courses because, you know, with moderate to low income families that don't have a full family unit, they need to understand what parenting is. So we try to break the stigma of pride that is in the community and reach out and give them that ability. I would like to bring all those things home to Norristown after going through this process of interviews and panel interviews, learning that there is a need and a cry for leadership in one of the most, or if not the most important organization in this borough, which is the Norristown Police Department, excuse me. There's no reason that I can go somewhere else and gain all this information and let my home fall. We cannot, I will not allow that to happen on my watch. My blood, sweat, and tears is in this community, it's in these streets, it's in these families. I want to bring back the family which I grew up in, 1000 block of Willow Street, born and raised. May not be what you see now, but we were a family. Each family, if you did something wrong, parents could beat you, take you home, and you would get another beating. That's the community that we want in Norristown. That's the Norristown I remember. That's the Norristown I want to revive. And that included law enforcement.
Thank you. Mr. Clowser.
Good evening, and thank you for coming out. My name is Rich Clowser. I'm currently the Chief of Police for New Britain Township, Bucks County, not to be confused with New Britain, Connecticut. My law enforcement career started basically when I was 14. My parents had a small sandwich shop in the area, in Pottstown area, and the police officers used to come in there to eat. I got to know them. I always wanted to become a police officer. At the age of 14, I joined the Pottstown Law Enforcement Explorers, where I got some experience. And then after I graduated high school, similar path, I joined the United States Army. I spent 3 years on active duty before I got out and decided I was going to go to college, pursue my degree. Unfortunately, that got interrupted by being deployed to Desert Storm because I didn't get out of the Army. I continued my service and went into the Army Reserve, where eventually I spent 34 years and attained the rank of Command Sergeant Major for 17 of those 34 years. So I have a vast amount of experience with leadership. But once I got back from Desert Storm, I said, it's time for me to become a police officer. I started to get myself into the academy on my own and was fortunate enough to be hired by Norristown as a police officer in 1993. So I was not born here, but I grew up professionally here. I spent 28 years of my life serving the streets of Norristown. I moved up through the ranks. I had a lot of great opportunities while I was at Norristown. I was a patrol sergeant. I was an instructor for use of force instructor, where we basically were one of the only departments in the area that actually did scenario-based training. Also, I was a patrol supervisor on the midnight shift for 17 years. So I was on the streets at 3 o'clock in the morning, some streets where people who have lived here all their life have never seen, and solving problems and serving the community of Norristown. I was fortunate enough in 2014 to be promoted to Deputy Chief of Police under Chief Talbot. During that time period, I brought a lot of, I learned a lot from Chief Talbot, a lot of things that we can continue to do. A lot of things that, from these questions I think have not occurred over the past 3 to 4 years. So I want to bring that stuff back. I want to bring the success that we had back from 2014 to 2021 when I left to become a chief. My passion is for modern progressive policing initiatives and making things better for a community. And that's why I want to come back to Norristown to do. My mantra when I was here as deputy chief and currently now as a chief is we can always do better. And we can do better than what was done over the past 3 years. And I can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Friends, if you've just joined us, please do me a favor. There are some QR codes on the wall. Please scan those QR codes. That will be how you will give us some feedback about what you hear here today. Okay, thank you. All right, gentlemen, can you describe a time when you were assigned to a community with low trust in the police? What steps did you take to build relationships and improve trust? And what were the results? Mr. Trail.
So as I previously stated, I spent some time in Baltimore, Maryland, and if those of you who aren't familiar, Baltimore has had a historic challenge in working with the community. One of the opportunities I had when I was there is after about a year of patrol, I got an opportunity to go into a community engagement unit, and it was a foot patrol unit. So I had a foot post on East Monument Street in the 2100 to 2500 block, which encompasses, if you know anything about Baltimore, Johns Hopkins Hospital, the Northeast Market. It's a very densely populated area for local businesses. And when I was put out there, I kind of was adrift. Okay, I didn't know much about the community. But I quickly realized that if you wanted to know anything about what's going on in the community, you had to go to the corner, because the corner was where all the community conversations took place. And once I learned that, I went down there and I started engaging people, and I engaged in people in the bodegas and the carryouts, and I would talk to anybody who would listen. And when I found people who would listen, I really didn't always just talk about police stuff. I talked about people stuff, because we're humans. We're all human beings, and we're social creatures. And for me, that was the advantage, to get into the community and just start talking to people, anybody would listen. And then when we started to form relationships, then once those relationships were in place, we started to talk about difficult questions. One of the issues on that post for the community in that area was shooting dice. It may seem like a harmless thing, but unfortunately in East Baltimore in the 90s, shooting dice led to violence, and violence led to shootings. And I saw a lot of police officers would go out there and work their posts, and as soon as they saw a dice game, they would wade in heavy-handed, grab the dice, lock people up, and create a lot of angst. My approach was a little bit softer and a little bit of partnership. So I would go in and maybe watch a throw or two, and then be like, hey guys, this has got to stop. You can't do this. It's a violation of local ordinance. And I built some trust that way. And I started to notice that people were coming to me with information about challenges in their respective communities. And I think when people started to come to me and to talk to me about things that I wasn't soliciting, I realized that maybe I'd broken through. And that's how I measured my success. One of the challenges I've had as chief in Lansdale is we're a very diverse community. We have 2 mosques, 19% of the population is foreign-born. And unfortunately, a lot of the folks who've come to this country from other countries, such as Bangladesh, they don't have a robust trust and appreciation of police. And this community, they were being victimized, and they continue to be victimized by scams, people posing as immigration officers, people posing as IRS agents demanding money. And through my relationship with the mosque, when I attended Salah and I started going in there and during prayer, I was opened up to this world of victimization that wasn't getting reported to the police department because they didn't trust the police. From that, we formed a partnership where I regularly attended prayer at the mosque, and ultimately from that, we were actually able to recruit a member of the mosque to become our parking education and enforcement officer. So, thank you.
Thank you. Now, this is the first time that we're going to be using the Slido app. Does everyone have it? Okay. Okay. Is it not coming up? Are you? It's slow? Okay. Let's just take a second so that everybody is on it. Is everyone signed into the guest Wi-Fi? Okay. It's slow down. Excuse me, gentlemen.
We're not complaining.
This morning, one of the things that I noticed that made a couple of people had asked me to help them, but they had a lot of windows open. And so you might want to check to make sure that you don't have a lot of windows open because that'll slow things down too. Okay, friends, you want to give me a high sign? You ready?
We have a couple paper copies.
Yes.
All questions are going through this slide with me?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, of course, it's not working properly.
Well, it was working properly this morning. I'm not really sure. Sometimes things.
I answered the question and still waiting.
Okay. So. Okay, so once you press send, then we're going to let the next candidate answer the question. And so that you may see that pause there, okay? All right, family, are we ready to move to the next person? Yes? Okay, all right. And if we need to pause after the candidate's questions, we'll be happy to do that. Yes, ma'am. No, it's just for the first candidate, and then the next candidate, and then the next candidate. Okay? All right. All right, we ready? Yes. Pardon?
Yeah. You'll see A, B, C on the answer. So essentially, candidate one will be A, and B, and then C. So it'll be, you'll see an ABC of each question, and that will be the way to identify. It'll also mention candidate one, candidate two, or candidate three. And as they, it gives them time for you to answer between the questions before it switches to the next slide. So that way you're not overlapping answers on the wrong person.
Okay.
Let's keep it moving.
Thank you. Mr. Benjamin.
The question, can you describe a time when you were assigned to a community with low trust in police? What steps did I take to build a relationship to improve trust, and what were the results? Well, you know, in Atlantic City, it's culturally diverse. And when I say culturally diverse, it's a melting pot. So, as my colleague said, some other cultures don't trust the police, but let's bring this home. Black and brown communities have an angst when it comes to trusting police officers. If we don't admit that truthfully, we're doing a disservice to everybody in this room. So what the actions we took in Atlantic City under the chief at the time, I became the Bravo platoon commander, at which time I had to begin to visit civic association meetings and bring the public up to speed as to what we were doing from a law enforcement perspective, educating them on our use of force continuum, educating them on interaction between law enforcement and police, and advising them that every interaction was meant to build trust that was being lost, whether it was by incidents in our department or nationwide incidents, because you know perception is people's reality. So what we did was I went out to these civic associating meetings, and then I followed that up by going around every district and giving the residents my telephone number, and I advised them if they didn't see a police officer in 1 hour, they were to call my cell phone. I did it at city council meetings. I did it on the street. I did it in juvenile centers where they played basketball, where their parents were English as a second language. I even had the interpreter explain it to them in Spanish because that was the next largest demographic, and Hindi. I did that. If they didn't see an officer, call me in 1 hour. I would call the shift commander if I wasn't working, and if I was, the sergeant was going to meet that individual at their home and make contact with them and let them know who they were and who the officers were working in their district for the day. Because at 50, 60, 70 years old plus, they are taxpayers and been paying taxes for 40, 50, and 60 years. And that will be a disservice in itself if they're not being serviced the way their tax dollars should be. Along with that, that was an opportunity for us to show the community our cultural competence, and that we understood how they felt, but it was also an opportunity to show them we're police officers, yes, but we're human beings also. We put our pants on the same way. We have the same dislikes and some, things that we don't come eye to eye, but we had to come to a happy medium, because normally when situations like that arise that cause trust to be strained, it's for something that we've done and we don't want to address internally, which I say is an outward manifestation of an inward problem.
Thank you. Please log your response. Please log your response on Slido. Mr. Clowser.
So prior to 2013, the Norristown Police Department was more of what we consider a traditional police department, right? We didn't really engage in modern, progressive policing initiatives until after 2013. And, during that time prior, my younger years in the department, we had zero tolerance type guidance. We had kind of not really worked on building trust with our black and brown communities. So, after 2013, we realized we had to do something different when Chief Talbot came in. We had a policing strategy that helped us with the framework of how the officers would behave, right? How we would engage with everybody in the community. And part of that is procedural justice, making sure we're listening to people, giving them equity, dignity, respect. But also we did other things, right? We reached out to the clergy. We formed a group of clergy that we could bounce things off of. We could go out in the community with. They were kind of our conduit to kind of build trust, get those introductions to people in the community. We went to NAACP. We asked them, how can we better serve the black community? How can we have them feel comfortable letting us know when there's a problem so we can address it? We also went to Oklahoma. We built relationships with Oklahoma to help us build relationships with our Latino population. In addition to that, for the Latino population, we hired a community liaison that spoke Spanish and focused on helping us build those relationships. As the deputy chief, some of the things that I've done personally were, we brought Coffee with a Cop to Norristown. We were one of the first ones in the area to do Coffee with a Cop. In fact, we had the people from California come out here in the old council room and fill it with departments throughout Montgomery County, Bucks County, to learn how we properly do Coffee with a Cop. We then, took Coffee with a Cop and said, let's do a water race with a cop in order that we can engage with the youth, in the streets of Norristown. Also, I did a Teen and Police Services Academy where we went to the high school in order to broaden, do away with the gap between law enforcement and youth. We would break bread together. We would have a topic each week to talk about. And those are all things that we did to build trust. In addition, we changed the way our officers' uniforms look. Not majorly, but if you look at their uniforms, their names are in broad letters. First name, last name, and badge number, right? Or first initial. That was to humanize them, and so that they couldn't be, people could trust them because they knew them by name.
Okay, we're going to ask our next question. Please share an example of when you addressed quality of life concerns in a neighborhood, such as speeding, homelessness, or police presence. How did you respond to community feedback, and what were the outcomes? Mr. Trail.
So the one thing that's kind of nice is that Lansdale is much kind of a little brother to Norristown. We're 20,000 people, 2.8 square miles, densely populated. Our biggest challenges right now have been the unhoused and traffic. We've had a pedestrian fatality strike in one of our neighborhoods that caused a lot of concern in recent weeks. I know Norristown has had several high-profile vehicle crashes that resulted in fatalities. So in that area, we're sharing a lot of similarities, and I have broad experience in dealing with them. But one thing that we have really struggled with right now is back during the COVID pandemic, we started to notice an increase in unhoused individuals living in our communities. And just by off chance one day, I had one of my community service officers. We have a department in the police department that just does community engagement. That's their sole function. And we wanted to go out and get a handle on how many unhoused persons were actually living in our community. And we had about 12 to 15. And we noticed that they were constantly demanding calls for service, but the things that they were needing weren't law enforcement related. They were often drug and alcohol, mental health, needs for housing, and all those other things. So we formed a small committee of people, professionals, that we ultimately formed into what we call the North Penn Hub. And right now, the North Penn Hub meets every month, and surrounding police departments, it's a multidiscipline meeting with doctors, lawyers, behavioral health specialists, drug and alcohol, probation, parole, your way home. And what we do is we take the most problem cases that we have and we triage there before the committee, and we roadmap sources, resources and availability options to get people away from being unhoused, to get them through addiction, and to create an opportunity for them to move on and transition to a better phase of their life. And that's been very successful. And on the heels of that, we said, well, that really works. Why don't we actually have our own mental health person on staff? So we wrote a grant in 2022 for $135,000. We got the grant award, and in 2023, we instituted a mental health co-responder. So we actually have a mental health professional working daily in the Lansdale Borough Police Department doing true co-responder programs to people in crisis. And the program has paid dividends. We have verifiable, documentable cases of people who are unhoused, challenged by drug and alcohol, challenged by lack of employment, challenged by lack of resources, who've been transitioned into transitional housing and hopefully going to take the next step to suitable housing. And one of the things that really kind of happened, and I didn't expect it, was how the men and women of the department really embraced the co-responder. Despite what you may think, your police officers don't want to go to work every day and fight and roll around the ground with people. And when they realized how she could assist in de-escalation, not only de-escalation at crimes, at calls for service, but also in de-escalation training, they bought in right away. With our traffic problem, one of the big concerns we have in our pedestrian truck is the daylighting of intersections. So we have worked with our Public Works Committee to mark off the setbacks for stop signs, 20 feet from a crosswalk, and create the daylighting of intersections where cars are no longer impeding visibility and ultimately causing fatal pedestrian accidents.
Thank you. Please log your response. Mr. Benjamin.
Understanding the importance of the effects of law enforcement on the community is one of the greatest things I've learned while as a commanding officer in Atlantic City. Like I said, I wanted to bring back here. What stood out to me with this question was there was a high crime open air drug market in the center of Atlantic City on Atlantic Avenue. The merchants were screaming that the drug dealers were operating in front of their establishments, which was cutting into their profit. Mothers, single mothers, were going to try to go to these convenience stores to gain food for their children, and were being stopped by these drug dealers openly and blatantly, peddling drugs to them. It finally rose to the level of meeting the mayor's office. So the mayor had I would say, impromptu walkabout with a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer, where he labeled the center of the city a zombie zone. From that, the chief of police called me up as the Bravo platoon commander again and asked me to put together an initiative to stamp out this activity. One thing that happened was a kid was murdered with an AR-15 rifle on Atlantic Avenue at this open air drug market. So he gave me the liberty to build a team and initiate this initiative, which I utilized canines, which were not the patrol K9 where you see them apprehending suspects, but it was the narcotics K9 and the bomb K9, along with undercover officers, veteran officers, and most importantly, the young officers, so we can teach them how to handle a case all the way through, from a narcotics investigation to a stop, to an arrest, to seizing evidence, and all of that, because I'm a proponent of mentorship. And that's what my biggest pet peeve is, the lack of mentorship and the lack of training. So I refuse to be bit by that bug when asked to run this initiative. So we ran this initiative, and it lasted 3 months, from Tennessee Avenue to Ohio Avenue, in which in 3 months we stamped out all of that crime. We literally brought it to a stop. You can look up the Philadelphia Inquirer. We went to civic associated meetings again, because not everybody has the internet and not everybody is engaged. So what we had to do was go out to the communities, these single parents where they don't have computers in their homes, and explain to them what we were doing. And also what was utilized during this initiative in New Jersey, we have what's called a drug restraining order, a drug narcotics restraining order. If you're arrested in a certain location and charged criminally, you cannot go back to that area at all, period. It's just like a domestic violence restraining order. You cannot make contact with that area, that individual, that merchant, or anything of the such, or you can be taken into custody, literally by being on that block. So we initiated that, and we stamped out the crime, and it actually worked.
Thank you. Please log your response. Mr. Clowser.
Obviously, there's various quality of life issues throughout Norristown. Homelessness, mental health, drug use. And on the point of having a hub, Norristown has had a hub since 2016. And I personally was involved in starting a child hub for at-risk youth, where we met with the school district and various organizations to address, what we can do to make them successful, which eventually led to us getting a grant for an at-risk youth court, or at-risk youth person, personally worked in Norristown to address the issues that we were having with the youth and keep them from being arrested. But the example that I'm going to use for this question basically deals with some robberies that shortly in early 2014 we were experiencing on the west end of Norristown. Over a period of about 2 months, we had over 30 robberies. And when we looked at that, we found that there was a commonality. It was Latino males late at night being robbed. They were easy targets. They carried cash with them. They were intoxicated to the point where they were basically defenseless, and they were, due to the language barrier, it was hard for us to get the information we needed to actually investigate these types of crimes. So what did we do to address this quality of life issue? Well, we started by, taking a victim-centered approach. We went out, if the officers were instructed that they saw a intoxicated Latino male walking around, they were to take least harm means to get them safe, which means, we don't want to have to arrest them if we don't have to. If we can take them home and make them safe, we'll do that. If not, then we're going to have to arrest them for public drunk. In addition to that, we went to Oklahoma, says, hey, we need you to message this, that this is happening. We're here to help. Okay, again, we have to build that trust, right? So we need them to understand we're here to help them. So, and also we went to the businesses, right? We went to the liquor establishments on the West End, and we gave them some guidelines. Hey, turn up the lights, at like 1:30, stop serving alcohol at 1:30, calm the music down a little bit so these individuals aren't leaving the bar totally intoxicated and getting robbed. And we also put up notification inside of the bars in Spanish so they knew, hey, this is what's happened, this is what we want you to do. Ultimately, we resolved that issue. But that's just one example. For quality of life issues in neighborhoods, what do you want your neighborhood to look like? That's what we're here to do, is help you make your neighborhood the way you want it to be. Every neighborhood's different. Every neighborhood wants their neighborhood to be differently. The police department can facilitate that, and we can partner with not only you, but other services to get the neighborhoods the way they need to be.
Thank you. Please log your response. Our next question will focus on repairing public distrust. Tell us about a time when your department faced public distrust, perhaps after a controversial incident. How did you engage with the community to rebuild trust, and what was the result? Mr. Tryon.
I think everybody on this, my colleagues and everyone in this room agree that we went through a massive disintegration or evaporation of public trust following the murder of George Floyd. And as a police professional and practitioner for so many years, that was a seminal moment in our profession. And fortunately for me, prior to that, because of my time in Baltimore, there was a gentleman who opened a bookstore, the Black Reserve bookstore, which is in Lansdale, and his name is Sheikh Anwar Mohammed. And right after I became chief, I wandered in this store and we started having these dynamic conversations. He's a very engaging individual. And we talked about everything. We talked about challenging issues facing Black and brown communities. And so I had that link. And I remember him calling me after the video had gone out and telling me what had happened. I hadn't seen the video yet. And of course, what followed was the civil unrest and the absolute evaporation of trust of the police. And we had to figure out a way to start to rebuild that. One thing is the protests came to Lansdale, as they did to many communities, and we had a decision. And our decision, and it was not just me, it was our police department, we were going to stand there in solidarity with the protesters denouncing unconstitutional policing. Much like my colleagues, I kneeled at the 300 block of East Main Street for 8 minutes with the community. And we worked to make a pledge that we were not going to allow that kind of incident to occur in our community. And that moves on to recruiting and make sure we're hiring the best people. But what came from that, and the legacy of that, is I joined the NAACP, and my friend Sheikh Anwar Muhammad actually became president of our Ambler branch. And we collaborated with area chiefs in North Penn area to have listening sessions. And one of them was probably 6 months after the incident, the murder of George Floyd, and it was a raw conversation in our YMCA, folks. One that still gives me a little bit of chills, because it opened my eyes and the other chief's eyes about what the worries are of members of the minority community, black and brown. Not just crime on the street and safe places and parks for the kids to play. They fear their children getting a driver's license because they're concerned that when they go out and drive at night and they get stopped by the police, they could be inadvertently shot and killed. I never realized that, folks. That touched me in a way that I didn't realize that. So we partnered with talking about youth. So we brought a group of youth drivers together and talked about, hey, this is how you should act when the police stop you. And we talked about our officers understanding that, like, hey, you need to be understanding that this belief exists in our communities. So, and it sparked so much engagement and has been very enriching to the department. And to this day, we still support all the activities that the NAACP hosts in our community. And that partnership is extremely important. We have to make those partnerships before the critical event. When a critical incident happens and everything is all sideways, that's not the time to pick up the phone and start meeting people. Those relationships need to be firmly established before the critical event. So the phone call is not, hey, I'm such and such. It's, hey, Mike, we just had this event. We need to talk.
Thank you. Please record your response. Mr. Benjamin.
Again, knowing the importance of policing in a small community like we have here in Norristown, my incident I'm going to use is in my former agency. We had several officer-involved shootings. Some justified, some the community felt as though were not justified, and it rose to the level of near anarchy. Again, being one that's involved in the community from the time I was a patrolman to the time I became a commander, as a member of the clergy, the chief calls on me once again, which I don't have a problem with. But the remedy was presence, presence, presence. Presence. Frequency builds trust, where distance breeds fear and angst. So we had to be intentional about our engagement with the community after each and every one of these events. And the best part about it was the chief of police was born and raised in Atlantic City. So he had that ability to reach out to his people he grew up with, who are now parents and grandparents, the clergy, which he leaned on me a lot for that because I was a member of the local clergy. And what we did was we started public service announcements, and we began to educate the public on our use of force continuum. What we train, we talked about what we train our officers to do in certain scenarios. We pounded it home with the transparency issue. Now I want you all to understand, transparency does not mean that as the chief of police, I will stand before you and give you every detail of an investigation that will jeopardize that investigation if the suspect has not been caught, or even if the suspect has been caught and it has not been tried. That I won't do, but I will give you everything that's necessary for you to understand that your community is now safe from that particular incident. After each and every incident or crisis intervention, the shift commander under my command will come out and meet the community and tell you all why we did what we did, the reason why we did it, and if we have that working relationship of trust, you all would already know the genesis of why we're here, because you gave us the information to act upon to extract that individual or individuals from the neighborhood. So that's what we did. Heavy engagement of education in the community, use of the clergy, use of the imam, and you just Trust is something you build every day, and we have to have a self-motivating factor within us inside of law enforcement to do a self-examination quarterly, monthly, daily, and we have to be honest with ourselves internally, because the law is for the lawless. Everybody is not lawless, so everybody can't be painted with that same broad brush. So we have to be strategic and use a scalpel when we deal with incidents like this.
Thank you. Please take a moment to record your responses. Our next question. Oh, I'm so sorry. I keep doing that, don't I? I'm so sorry, Mr. Clowser. Mr. Clowser.
All right, so, in the earlier session, I spoke about George Floyd, what it did to, nationwide, what it did to law enforcement, and how I marched and kneeled with the peaceful protesters. And it was a horrible thing that happened that, shined a terrible light on law enforcement. And, I can tell you from my experience, it did not erode trust of the police in Norristown at that time. We had already built such a strong connection with the community through the clergy, through NAACP, through ACLAMO, through some other stakeholders, our council, they trusted us. We did things, we were transparent, we had a policing strategy that worked, and we didn't experience those, a backlash from George Floyd. There was an incident in 2016, similar to what we're facing today with immigration. Some vehicles would show up, some people would jump out with all kinds of military vests or whatever. They would go up on a porch of a Hispanic house, and they'd take people away. And who do you think got blamed for that? The Norristown police got blamed for that, and it wasn't even us. So we had to build trust again with the Latino community to make them feel safe. We need them to report crimes to us. We need them to trust us. So we took some efforts to do that. Again, we hired the community liaison who was Hispanic. We built a stronger relationship with ACLAMO and had listening sessions, open door policies where the chief and I would sit down on certain nights during the week for people to come in and express their concerns to us. How can we address those concerns? That we're experiencing some of the same things today that we experienced back in 2016. But we have to always have that trust bank. Like I said, when the bad things happened in Norristown from 2014 to 2021, we had everybody's support. We had people backing us. We had the clergy that would show up whenever we needed them. We had stakeholders that would show up whenever we needed them. So I know what to do to build trust again with the black and brown community in Norristown. I know what it takes, and I'm willing to do the work.
Thank you, Mr. Clowser. Record your response. We've reached our midpoint. I'm going to ask you to take 20 seconds to stand up and just stretch a little bit, and then we're going to sit back down. So no socializing. Just stand up, get your blood circulating, and then we're going to sit back down. I'm going to set my timer. Is that okay for everybody, just to kind of let loose a little bit? Sometimes after you're sitting a little while, You get kind of tired, so just a second to stand up. All right, friends, pass the pieces over. Let's sit down and resume. Thank you so much. Our next question. Describe a situation where you had to respond to an incident involving racial or cultural tensions in the community. How did you ensure the response was fair, culturally sensitive, and effective? Mr. Trail.
So as I previously spoke earlier, Islamic population. In the Islamic faith, there's actually 5 calls to prayer daily, and their holy day is Friday. And the 2 mosques are actually located inside residential neighborhoods, and they don't really have a lot of parking. So one of the biggest challenges we had right after becoming chief of police is I had a lot of members of the community, businesses and homeowners, who were very upset that on Friday, when the mosque would have its prayer session, that there would be no parking. It would be illegal parking everywhere. And, you know, we were in the mosque trying to engage with the community. So we didn't believe that heavy-handed parking enforcement was necessarily the appropriate measure, but we knew we needed to communicate. So again, we're back in the mosque on Fridays, talking with the members there, talking with the leadership, talking with the imam, and getting their buy-in and getting them routed to safe, legitimate parking spaces that were in short walking distance from the mosque. And that de-escalated a lot of tension, because one of the things we've noticed, especially with the mosques in our community and all other issues, is we practice a concept I call about thinking globally, acting locally. And the mosque and the tensions in the Middle East have definitely flared up relations with mistrust and concerns, and the mosque and the Muslim community has been victim of property crimes, crimes of violence, and we've had to work tirelessly to make sure that people are reporting what's going on, because again, there's that under-reporting that's going on in these communities that don't trust the police. So that was really important that we did that, and I think we've made some progress on that. One of the things that's troubling me right now is what's going on with ICE and the immigration issues, because much like Norristown, we have a Hispanic population, and I don't care what your politics are on the issue. People need to be treated with dignity and respect. And what I've seen going on in some of these videos in different states is not professionalism. There's a way to go about immigration enforcement. The Lansdale Police Department do not engage in immigration enforcement activities. We'll do what's legally obligated to be done. If we're called upon, we'll keep the peace. But I've already told my officers, if the Immigration Customs Enforcement shows up and they start abusing our residents as guardians of our community, we're to step in. It's no different if it's a police officer who's engaged in excessive use of force. If it's a federal agent engaged in excessive use of force, we're not going to allow that, because we're the guardians of our community. And it's important that we understand that. The other issue that's occurring with that right now simultaneously is the Hispanic population, much like other populations in the mosque, are traditionally underreport crime. So now, if they're here and their immigration status is in question and they witness a crime, what are they not going to do? They're not going to call the police department. They're not going to be witnesses for fear of deportation. And that is troubling, because they're going to continue to be victimized at higher rates.
Thank you. Please record your response. Mr. Benjamin.
As I said earlier, in the earlier session, this was one of those firebrand issues for me. Soon after being promoted to sergeant, working on the midnight patrol, I had 2 young Caucasian officers stopping a African-American man. And I will never forget it, like I said earlier, on Caspian Avenue. Now, many people you will hear say, ain't no way a cop gonna sneak up on me in that big black and white car. But it just so happens that when they had this traffic stop going on, once we turn the lights on, emergency lights on, we can also get blinded. They hadn't seen me come up as their backup officer. They take the man out the car and they begin to use the N-word. toward him. So at this juncture, I had to maintain myself. I approached them and I explained to them, I'm going to report you, but we're going to use this as a training scenario while we're on scene right now. They were trying to search his car. I forgot to put that in part earlier. They were trying to search his car with a flashlight and began to go in the car. I said, absolutely not. Stop where you are. Your behavior has just ruined this whole stop. I said, one, your conduct is unbecoming. That's one. Two, you began to go in this car. You didn't ask him for permission to go in the car, which you're constitutionally obligated to do, and he has a right to refuse. But what you can do, shut the door, you turn the flashlight on, and anywhere your flashlight beam can attract, if you can see something in an open, then you get a telephonic search warrant and you go in his car. Because if he sees it, if you see it and he knows it's in there, he's going to say no. But at this juncture, all of that is up in the air. I did what I was supposed to do. I reported the misconduct to Internal Affairs, and our chief of police at the time had an open door policy. I went down and sat with him. I said, Chief, something needs to be done to them. They were subsequently moved off of my shift. I wasn't advised of whatever disciplinary action was taken against them at that time. But the issue became, for me, this is the flashpoint. I'm not tolerating it. And I explained to the chief, the community, we can have 15 great jobs, but one mess up can deplete all of those 15 great jobs we've been doing. It could be for 5 years. That one incident can take us back 5 years from what the trust that we already built. So I said, at this particular juncture, Chief, something needs to be done, or I might need to go over you. Because that could have been my son, that could have been my brother, my sister, my cousin. It could have been your sister, your brother. We don't need cops like that on this job. But, you know, we have a contractual obligation when it comes to labor relations and the union. You must have copious notes, and it has to be certain incidents that happen for an immediate termination, which they didn't get terminated. But at that point, I began to watch them. Other supervisors began to watch them. And also they began to watch me, and I was labeled at that point one that's going to violate the blue code. I don't have a problem with that. The Constitution, we swore an oath to the Constitution, not to a code. That's where I stand on that issue, and I will never forget it.
Thank you. Please record your response. Mr. Clowser.
Obviously, I'm not a person of color, but, you know, I've seen and experienced people of color being treated unfairly by the police. It's not right. It's not something that we condone. You know, just like any profession, we have some bad apples that have to be policed up. And, you know, as the deputy chief, you know, we put things in place to make sure that everyone in the community was treated with dignity and respect. We had a policing strategy that had procedural justice woven throughout it. And what does procedural justice mean? It's, you know, legitimacy, transparency, you know, fairness, you know, but procedural justice, all the officers understood, number one, listen to what people have to say. You know, you're doing a car stop, sell the stop. Listen to what they have to say. Give them equity, okay, fairness. Explain what you're doing. If you're going to arrest somebody, explain it so they know what's coming. Explain why you're giving them a citation over giving them a warning. And then leave them with their dignity. The last thing you can do is take away someone's dignity. So we never want to do that. And that was, again, from 2014 to 2021, that was the expectation of the Norristown Police Department on how you treat people, how you encounter with them. Everything that we do, even with each other, was procedurally just. You know, and I say that was the expectation they were also held accountable for that. You know, if we found that, you know, now we had body-worn cameras, you know, we review body-worn cameras routinely. If we found where someone wasn't being treated respectfully, you know, there was a discussion, you know, first there was a discussion. If it happened again, we would escalate discipline. However, we never got to that point because the officers were professional. They understood that we wanted everyone treated fairly with dignity and respect under procedural justice. And that's how we, you know, address those issues. Obviously, we talked earlier about, you know, the impact of George Floyd, the impact on immigration. You know, I'm not going to rehash that stuff, but those are things that, you know, yeah, they were cultural issues that impacted the trust that, you know, the community had on the police because it was a nationwide incident, right? And again, I would say, based on what we were doing back in those years, we didn't really have that issue.
Please record your response. Okay, our next question focuses on ensuring officer accountability. Can you give an example of when an officer under your command was involved in serious misconduct or a complaint? What actions did you take to ensure accountability, and what was the outcome? Mr. Trail.
As I told you, I spent some time in the suburban Pittsburgh area back in the early 90s, and I actually was a witness in the Justice Department civil rights investigation into an officer in my organization. So I gave testimony, or I gave a deposition related to his conduct. Shortly before the city of Pittsburgh went under its consent decree, I saw a lot of the same abusive practices in Baltimore, shortly before Baltimore went under consent decree. So I've seen serious misconduct. I've seen officers who abuse the badge, and unfortunately, it's a practice that cannot be allowed to exist. Within my organization, shortly after I became chief, one of the things that we have, much like Norristown has right now, is we were short on staffing. We lost a lot of senior level people, and we'd already been down staffing, so we had to hire quickly. And we had a number of full-time and part-time officers, and a number of those individuals decided to participate in our hiring process for full-time. They were told that you would go through the process as any other individual. Unfortunately, during one of those background screenings, information came to light that suggested that an officer in our organization was abusing his privileges to the MDT, or the mobile data terminal, in his or her car. And through that terminal, they had the ability to run driver's license, dates of birth, addresses, a lot of information. It's a sacred terminal, and you cannot abuse it. Unfortunately, we've had an individual who was doing that. I learned about it early in the morning. I did the due diligence with our records officer, our TAC officer, who monitors the system, reviewed the evidence. I told my commanders that the individual was out of the process immediately, and I met with him later that day, and he was no longer a Lansdale Borough police officer. And that was a challenge for me because I'd only been there about 6 months, and a lot of these guys who were part-timers were really well valued in our organization. And but I set out to the organization that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated, that we're not going to do this, that we're professionals. And what we've done, and that's kind of helped elevate our game, so to speak. We've implemented a lot of training right now, and we continue to do that. We have to be training our young men and women, okay? Not about the basics. They understand the basics. I mean, right and wrong is pretty glaring. And what we need to do in our recruitment and hiring process is we need to find good people to be police officers in our communities. We can train them to do the job. That's not a prerequisite, but you have to be a good person coming in the door. And if you're not going to serve the community that I'm the chief of police in. But we need to utilize technology. There are a lot of technologies out there, such as body-worn cameras. We can use software to monitor the body-worn cameras, to look for patterns of language and behavior that would serve as early warning indicators for people and officers who engage or are likely to engage in police abuse or corruption. And we can get that technology. It's in the marketplace today. And I would definitely use technology to help screen all this massive amount of data we're collecting on our body-worn cameras. But conduct unbecoming an officer won't be tolerated, and you either get the training that you need to fix the problem, or you will be shown the door.
Thank you. Please take a moment to record your response. Mr. Benjamin.
Yes. Earlier, I spoke of an incident where it was an officer misconduct incident where we had an officer join the previous police department where I was at. He was underperforming, I should say, on another shift, and they decided to transfer him to my shift because I was a proponent of training and mentorship. But when he got there, the downward spiral continued to the point where he was stopping single females, saying inappropriate things. Once he got to my shift, it began documented. I called on a strong supervising sergeant, who took the initiative to document, have several counseling sessions with him. We had put in place through the early warning system a 90-day observation period, but during that observation period, he made an arrest. And when he was taking the suspect into the booking and detention, you have to secure your weapon before you go in this secure facility. At that time, he took his weapon off and literally pointed the weapon at himself and looking down the barrel of the gun. For me, that was enough. That was it. It was on camera. So I took all the write-ups we had, because you know we have to deal with collective bargaining when you're dealing with officer disciplinary action. So I took all the write-ups we had. Previous shift commanders never wrote anything up. It was just the scuttlebutt, yo, he's trouble, blah, blah, blah. So we took the initiative to do necessary paperwork, made the report, and I pretty much demanded this was not the career field for him. But when they did the exit interview, found out he never wanted to be a cop. It was something that his parents impressed upon him. So when he says we have to use resources we have when we hire young people, this is the classic case of letting one slip through the cracks that could have been so detrimental. The prisoner, had he succeeded in accidentally or permanently disfiguring himself or killing himself, he would have traumatized the officers working in the whole booking and detention facility, the suspect that he was in processing, and then we would have to explain to his family how this came about if we know this employee was in a downward spiral. So that's the situation I chose to use to show the importance of we must be conscious of mental stressors. And not only that, I want the public to understand the way we deal with stuff as law enforcement is totally different from you. We have a jaded, and I think they'll agree, a jaded, how can I say, what we make funny will be detrimental to you. But because we do it so often, and we see it so often, we have to channel that in a fashion that doesn't send us over the edge. But as supervisors, that's one thing we must get a hold of and let our young people know. It's no problem asking for help.
Thank you. Please record your response. Mr. Clowser.
So when we talk about serious misconduct, you know, I view that as something that is cause for termination. You know, you're no longer going to be working for the Norristown Police Department. And over the years and during my tenure as deputy chief here, we had a few incidents where we terminated officers. But I can tell you, it wasn't because of the conduct on duty, it was because of conduct off duty. In one particular incident, we had an officer who lived in the municipality. He was off duty and assaulted his girlfriend. Now, she had to come to the Norristown Police Department to report that. You know how difficult that was for her? You know, and so the steps we had to take in this investigation were very sensitive First, we had to make sure she had the proper support, and she wasn't in English speaking either. So it made we had to, have our community liaison be there with her throughout interviews, follow up with her, stay engaged with her, ensure her that we were going to do what we needed to do to keep her safe and prosecute this case. Ultimately, the morning of the incident, command staff's notified immediately, by the officers who took the initial report. The chief immediately put the officer on administrative leave, and we requested the assistance of the district attorney's office because we needed an outside agency to investigate a crime that occurred involving one of our officers in our jurisdiction. We couldn't investigate it ourselves. I had to go to the officer's house, inform him that he was on administrative leave, along with county detectives at the time who, at that time, served a search warrant on him for his phone because there was evidence on his phone of the assault. And then also I had to take his gun and badge. So, and this is an officer I knew. He was from Norristown. He grew up here. He was one of our dispatchers initially when I first started. Eventually during my career. But so it was sad, but it was something that had to be done. Ultimately, he was prosecuted and lost his job. He was terminated. But we didn't have these massive or serious misconducts on duty because of the systems we had in place, right? Because of the checks and balances that we had in place, the early warning systems. I reviewed all use of force reports personally and looked to see if they were justifiable. In most cases, they were. In some cases, there were some minor policy violations or some training issues that we had to correct. But the Norristown police officers, from 2014 to 2021, I can tell you, they were very professional in how they presented themselves, and we didn't have this type of issue.
Thank you. Please record your response. We're down to our last two questions. Gentlemen, please share an example of a high-profile or critical incident, such as a use of force situation or public safety emergency, where you had to communicate with the public. How did you manage the communication and maintain transparency, and what was the outcome? Mr. Trail.
So as I told you earlier, one of my roles is one of the commanding officers of the Montgomery County Major Incident Response Team, and we were deployed on, I believe it was May 25th, 2020, to the city of Philadelphia to assist them with civil unrest. Then later that evening, we actually returned back to Montgomery County when there was unrest at the King of Prussia Mall. So I've had a lot of experience with public safety emergencies in planning and carrying out logistics, but one of the biggest challenges I faced in my career was the COVID-19 pandemic. That was, I don't think there's anybody in the room who doesn't remember the day when the government decided they were going to shut down the country. And I often remember thinking back, what does that mean? And that was a challenge because there was rumors afoot everywhere. There was disinformation on social media. Communication was, there was absent communication, in my opinion, from the county officials, from local officials, and it was a free-for-all. So one of the things I did, I was one of the first chiefs in the area to actually pen a letter, an open letter to the community, and say, Lansdale Police Department is going to be your trusted source for information. We were going to work to carry out the edict of the governor and the President of the United States at the time on how things were going to be done, but it challenged our community, okay? A lot of people were out of work, lost jobs. Our businesses suffered. Our small businesses disappeared. A lot of minority businesses had never recovered from the COVID-19 pandemic. But early on, we got ahead of the messaging. We established a communication. We directed people to our social media footprint and our website. and I constantly provided updates to the community about what was going on. And when rumors came about, we worked to dispel the rumors and give people facts about what was going on. I think we did a good job. It's sadly, there are those communities that have not recovered from it, but messaging is really important. Another time that we had a challenge is in the summer of forgive me, years just blind by anymore, but either 2021 or 2022, we had an epidemic of gun violence in Lansdale Borough. We had 3 shootings in 3 weeks. The first shooting had 2 victims, the second shooting had 2 victims, and the third shooting had 3 victims. And all of these shootings, as is the case, were related. It's sad is that today our shooting victims could be tomorrow's homicide suspects because of this ridiculous oath to violence and pledging unity and all this nonsense. But messaging was really important on that because our community was scared. So we needed to go out. I held a press conference that morning, talked about what was going on, alleviated the public fear as best I could because we had not captured the shooters. But because of the investments we made in the community, we were able to get information about who the shooters were, and we actually solved those cases rather quickly. So I have experience in these public emergencies, giving information, but all of that framework, that has to be in place before the critical incident exists. And that comes through trust and building relationships with the community.
Thank you. Please record your response. Mr. Benjamin.
Yes, the incident I worked on was, which was a public emergency that didn't manifest until after the investigation of the case that I responded to. I actually responded to a housing project where a infant had fell out the fourth floor window. When I did the investigation and I went to sit down to interview property management, it was on the first floor. They had an armed guard outside. They had 9 windows in the office where I was doing the interview. And I noticed that there was child restraints, 2 child restraints in each window. So it was 18 restraints. So I happened to ask him before I closed the interview. I distinctly said, his name, and I said, let me ask you a question before I terminate this interview. I said, are those child restraints in the windows? He said, yes. I said, did the young lady have a child restraint in her window on the 4th floor? He said, no, she didn't. I said, do you not give those child restraints out to everybody that moves in above the 1st floor? He said, no, we don't. They have to pay for them. So I said, how much do they cost? He said, approximately $100. I asked him the cost. I think he said $19 or $20. That I put in my report. I called my commanding officer. It got all the way up to the mayor's office. So when we talk about what do you do when you address the public, I wasn't allowed to address the public. The mayor addressed the public after it got to the governor's office, which was Governor Corzine. He came to Atlantic City, and you can imagine the first place he went to was that housing project, and he went into this young lady's house. They tried to call DIFUS on her. They tried to do everything. I said, absolutely not. She was a student in school. She did everything right by her child. Don't make this her problem, because it's not her problem. They are basically extorting residents for something that costs $20. They're charging them $100 under the cap. So it got to the governor coming down, walking through the building. The New Jersey State Senate deemed it an emergency because this wasn't the first time it happened. But because I dove so deep into the investigation and refused to let this young lady be charged with negligence or child abuse, and I stood my ground. I stood my ground. The mayor understood. We'll do the public portion of it, but we'll use your report to do what we got to do in the public with the governor when he gets here, because he wants to go straight to that place. Took him there. The Senate formed a bill, became law. Every public housing project or building that's accepting public funds as a means of assistance must, by law, above every 1st floor, every floor above floor 1 must have child restraints when you bring these people in as a resident. So that's something that stood out to me, and I wasn't allowed to address the public, and it was probably the best thing that I didn't address the public with the information that I had, because you just don't mistreat people like that. When something's crucial like that and so detrimental, and the kid survived for about 4 or 5 days, and then it passed away. So it was deep.
Thank you. Please record your response. Mr. Clowser.
So there's been a few high-profile critical incidents, during my tenure as deputy chief here in Norristown. One that comes to mind involved we had a large juvenile fight, and it was very difficult for the officers to control, but they ended up having to arrest a couple juveniles. Well, while arresting these juveniles, there was, of course, everybody has a cell phone out, and there was some video that went viral that didn't look good. I mean, it really didn't look good. However, it was, the officers had to do what they had to do under those circumstances. So that night that this arrest was taking place, the video immediately was released. It's out there. The families came down to the police station here. Were very upset with how the juveniles were treated, how everything elapsed. I shouldn't say everybody was upset. I think some of the families actually acknowledged the behavior of their son or daughter. But there was one, the juvenile that was shown on video. That family was very upset. So what did we have to do to get ahead of this? We immediately started a internal investigation into the incident, started interviewing everybody we possibly could, both the officers, the people that were in attendance, those that we could identify, get as much information as we could. We put out a press release. We also wrote to council what exactly we were doing, so they could answer the questions if they were asked. So we're doing all this stuff. We're trying to be as transparent as we possibly can during the investigation. At some point, the family decides they're going to do a rally right out here at outside Borough Hall, and so we prepared for the rally. We prepared the officers. We gave them certain instructions. This is their right. They have a right to First Amendment free speech. But one of the interesting things about that was we had more support than they did. Our clergy was actually quite upset that these people were treating the police department the way they were, or accusing the police department the way they were. And that all goes back to building that trust, right? We talk about, the trust that we built between 2014 and 2021. And we had that when this critical incident happened. And we were getting positive feedback on Facebook, on social media. We were getting, positive letters were sent to the municipal manager. So having that trust in place really helped us deal with that incident.
Thank you. Please record your response. Gentlemen, we've come to our final question. What is your vision for community policing in Norristown? And how would you build a department that reflects the values and needs of this community? Mr. Trail.
So my vision is a culture of cooperation and collaboration. We need to work together. Early on, when I was a police officer in Baltimore, one of my FTOs said something that always stuck with me. He said, never forget that the community lets us do our job. I never really understood that until the riots following the tragic death of Freddie Gray. But it's resounded in my ethos about how I follow and engage in community engagement. Every single police officer in this department has to be a community engagement officer, okay? But sometimes it's a challenge when you respond to calls for service. So in Lansdale, we created a community service unit where we specialize in community engagement. We work with our mental health co-responder, and we work to address community concerns. First and foremost, one of the things we did after I became chief was we had a community survey. And any one of us who ultimately moves on to be your chief, I recommend to the committee and to everyone here, do a community survey. Get honest feedback on what the concerns are of the community. Because without that roadmap, I think there's 4 police service areas and 7 wards in your community as far as elected officials. And each one of those individual geographical areas has different needs. So if we're trying to police Norristown, and I don't like to use the word police Norristown, but if we're trying to provide public safety services for Norristown, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's unique to the individual communities. And we need to do those partnerships. We need to embrace those partnerships. We only got 2 minutes this time, so all right, I'm a little off my game. But there was a gentleman here a couple weeks ago in one of the council meetings. He talked about this program called the SRC. I don't know him. I'm not advocating for it. But the things that man said about how we need to engage our youth and provide them opportunity, both economic, idle time is the devil's handmaiden, right? We need to keep our children engaged. We need to keep them out of trouble. And we need to give them mentorship and show them leadership so they can develop properly. Most importantly, we need to look out for the welfare of the men and women of the police department. Every one of my colleagues will agree this job is challenging and has challenged all of us, and we've all had our own mental health journey. We need to understand, and we know that our new officers are going to engage in situations that are going to challenge them, and we've got to give them the tools and the resources to thrive, not just survive.
Thank you. Please record your response. Mr. Benjamin.
My vision of community policing for the Norristown Police Department is 1, constitutionally led, 2, culturally competent, 3, trustworthy, 4, service-oriented, 5, transparent, with the emphasis on procedural justice. And the reason why I say that is, through this whole course of interviewing for this position, we've come across statements like there's an internal cry for leadership, there's an external cry for leadership. The previous heads of the organization didn't stay. We want stability. We have massive exodus from officers for what was considered a failure of leadership. Let me say this. A head doesn't control the whole body. Okay? A head takes care of its body so it can take care of its community. Culturally competent. When we make arrests, they're legitimate arrests that withstand the prosecutorial process, and we don't lose because of probable cause. That's a supervisor issue. The sergeant is the frontline supervisor. That's a training issue. We raise our right hand and say we are pledging an oath to the Constitution, which says every citizen that's law-abiding has a right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, safety without loss of life, due process in their property, in their person, but obviously it's being missed, and we hear you. We sit here, we hear you, but what gets in my crawl is, this is my home. We don't have the option of losing. So look at it from a different perspective. Those officers left, not all of them, because I talked to several of them. They didn't leave because of mismanagement. They left, some of them, because of internal strife, age gap issues. I come with degrees. I come with the technical knowledge to do the job, but I'm being sequestered by somebody who doesn't have the qualifications I have, but is sitting there taking all of the money, sitting behind the desk telling me what I have to do instead of coming out here and meeting me to meet the obligation of the community. They want to call me on the phone, tell me what to do over the phone. Supervision is in person, people. And if we're short, guess what? Not near a person sitting to my right or left will tell you, if it's all hands on deck, I'm still a cop. If I'm still a cop, guess what? I'm in the game. I'm in the fight. I'm not just a manager, I'm all hands on, because guess what? One thing you all have to remember, not every officer wants to come and go to battle. No officer, I submit to you, that I know wants to come to work and have to use that handheld weapon or that taser, because with it comes a cost. It comes trauma to the community, trauma to the suspect, whether suspect legitimate or not, is still trauma involved. A hatred that stems toward law enforcement, regardless of what the reason was they did it. They only see right here in front of them.
Thank you. Please record your response. Mr. Clowser.
So based on these questions that we were asked tonight, I have to tell you, I'm saddened. This is not the police department I left in 2021. You know, I know how to police Norristown. I've done it. You know, I know what works. I've talked about that tonight. We had a policing strategy that included everything that was just said. Procedural justice, I mentioned it earlier. We've been doing it. We were doing it. The officers down there know how to do it. You know, so I've actually operationalized the ideas that some of the others have said today in Norristown. Right? I was here for 28 years. The last 8 as deputy chief. I care about this place. I still care about it, even though I had an opportunity. I left. I want to come back. I want to come back and make it like it was from 2014 to 2021. And it can be done. You know, I know the people that are down there. They know me. They know that they're going to have to work hard. That's how we changed the culture of the police department before. And I could do it again. Give me the opportunity to do it again. You know, I'm not going to send out surveys. I'm going to go meet with people. I'm going to go meet with the stakeholders, find out what we need to do differently. What did they like about what we were doing prior to 2021 that we could do again? What do we need to do differently now that they're not getting? What services aren't they getting? How are they really being treated? And what are we going to do about it? Because I know, I've done it, right? I've operationalized it. I can do it again. Give me the opportunity to do it again, and I promise you, I will get it back to where it was prior to 2021. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. My friends, there are 3 additional, after you record your response to this question, so I'll give you a couple of seconds to record your response for this last candidate. Okay, now there are 3 final survey questions for you. Please answer 1 question for each candidate. The questions ask whether, based on what you heard tonight, you believe the candidate would lead with community trust and engagement, accountability and transparency, cultural competence, and fairness. Let's begin with Mr. Trail. Please take a moment to consider and submit your response from Mr. Trail. Now please submit your response for Mr. Benjamin. And submit your response for Mr. Clowser. Would you please join me in just giving our candidates a round of applause? Friends, thank you for attending and contributing to this important process. Your presence reflects the strength and commitment of the Norristown community. And to our candidates, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your vision, and your time with us. We appreciate your thoughtful responses and your willingness to engage directly with the residents of Norristown. As we move forward, community voices will continue to shape this process, and it will also shape the future of public safety in Norristown. The future depends on trust, transparency, and collaboration. Today was a meaningful step toward that vision. Thank you again, and please take care. Be safe.
Those that had a paper response, if you can make sure we